So I got a few requests to show more of the build process. In the past, I've been better about making videos throughout the build process, kind of setting it all up, even sometimes a step that shows you when I'm halfway through, and then of course the completed build. So here, I wanted to go ahead and show you the start of this build. So what I have here is an ARP9 from EMERBU Toys, and EMERBU Toys sells the TG or Tian Gong ARP9. Now it's an awesome value for $120. You know, you get the metal gears, upgraded high-speed motor, upgraded spring, just definitely some great components. But the TG ARP9 isn't as robust or as durable as the much more expensive XYL ARP9, which, is at least $100 more, even, $200 more sometimes in that range. So with this TG ARP9, you just have the component of the one body that splits open, right? You don't have the ability to switch out the handguard, which you do with the much more expensive ARP. So I thought, well, let's see if I can go ahead and figure out a way to make this TG ARP9 work with the handguard. Now, I'm lucky enough to get a bunch of these blasters and to get extra blasters, sometimes blasters that may have something wrong with them. So I don't have any issue with cutting one. Now, if this was my only blaster and, I was a 16-year-old kid who didn't have a lot of money, I probably would not cut mine. So let me tell you that right now. But again, different position here. So I thought I'd show you. And it's just kind of cool to show some of these things that can be done, right? So I needed to get the handguard off, but I wanted to cut it at the best point possible. So the reason why I cut right here is, well, because, I knew the screw for the handguard would go right here, kind of approximating based off of other blasters. But I didn't want to cut further back because I wanted to keep this flush right here. That's where the rail from the top goes on. So I wanted that point to be there. I just thought that would be good for the rail. And the nice thing about this blaster is on the inside, if we pop it open here, this piece right here does a really good job of holding the T-piece back. Like, that's what it's there for. So the way this one's designed, this piece here, and there's, this piece on this side, those hold that T-piece nice and tight against the gearbox, which is needed. So obviously I didn't want to mess with that at all. So instead I just cleared out this space. Okay. And then I started kind of doing some prototyping. So again, I'm lucky enough to have some fast 3D printers, and you can do some prototyping pretty fast. And, it's not a big deal because you're making much smaller models too when you're prototyping. At least I am for sizes. So eventually I got to the point where I got the right size for this piece. So this piece is going to go in here like this. Now you may have noticed I already put some rivet nuts in here, right? So that's how it's going to get secured in. Rivet nuts work great in situations where if they start to pull out, they're going to be tight up against something, so it's not going to do anything to get too loose. So that's why I used rivet nuts instead of heat inserts here. Right, so that'll go in here like that. You see? Now, because of where I cut it, because of this pattern, there's a slight notch there. Obviously, I don't like how that looks, so I wanted to make like a bezel for it. So this bezel piece will actually go on here, and then this should push down. And this should push flush, actually, once we get it on there all the way. Okay. So that's flush on there, and it's flush when the rail is up. So that's kind of what I was really going for. I wanted to get this nice and flush against the rail. And so if I adjust it, it should be, yeah, there we go. So this kind of bezel goes nice and flush against the rail. And then we can go ahead and go with this piece, which I printed. Now this is a metal barrel nut. You can print barrel nuts, but since I had extra ones, I thought it would be a much better idea to use a metal one. It just makes it easier, and it's stronger, and it's just easier to get the threads to line up and everything. So sometimes when you're 3D printing, your threads may be too tight, so you can start kind of heating them up carefully, and then you could go ahead and get them to work. So this is what we got going here. So that's how the handguard's going to fit on. Here's an old, an MK8 handguard. Started to paint it because the only extra one I had was that khaki color, and I wanted this to be like an all black. So this is going to go on here hard. So I'm not going to even push it on all the way right now because then it makes it difficult to get that out. But basically that'll push on all the way. It lines up almost perfectly, maybe a 0.5 millimeter gap. So not a big deal with the top rail. So you'll have this nice, cool, long handguard here. Going to replace, I already did, nice long barrel here. We're going to see how that affects the performance. I don't think it's going to make a difference. Like, I don't think going from that shorter barrel to this longer barrel, the way this one's set up, I don't think we're going to see a drop in performance, but we will see. Some stabilizer pieces. So these are going to go around here, and this just slides basically directly into these two channels. These pieces still need to get cleaned up, sanded, painted, right? Rail riser. So this again still needs to get cleaned up and painted. And actually I had all these extra of this size rail, and I was trying to figure out how to incorporate them but make them look nice. So I'm gonna, these spots were already here. So basically I have a filler piece that'll go inside this, and then I'll actually use like rivet nuts with metal, so it'll be like a nice metal ring. It'll look really nice. Some canted rail risers for the sights. Not sure which sights we'll put on there yet. And then the other thing I did was I created an adapter to use a buffer tube. So again, this isn't sanded and everything. So I had to go ahead and do some prototyping to get it to fit, because the way this attachment is, right? So this attachment is different than the buffer tubes we've seen with any others, or at least that I have. So I probably will actually put a piece in here that fills that hole, a solid piece of plastic that has a rivet nut on it facing this way, so that when this is screwed in there, it's pulling the rivet nut towards, and it can't pull it anyway. Now this goes on here tight anyway, so you probably, it's not 100% necessary to do that, but if I'm going to build it, I'm going to try to build it as, heavy duty as I can. So this should just turn on here, and it does turn tight. So let's see why. There we go. It's locked in place. So lines up almost perfect, and then you go ahead and have your buffer tube off here, and of course your buffer tube would secure in here too. Again, another place where I use a rivet nut for securing that buffer tube is I'll drill this hole straight through so that I can see where it's coming out, and then I'll drop a rivet nut there too, again, so that this is pulling against the rivet nut, and that way it'd be impossible to pull it out, whereas with a heat insert, those can get pulled out. So that's a quick rundown. I know that was a little longer video, longer than I expected too, but that way it gives you a really good idea of everything I'm doing here, and hopefully this turns out great. You can see I've started painting on some things, but I still have a lot of steps on others. But I think it's going to look really cool, different, and I really do think that this Gen 8.5 gearbox is really nice that's in these ARP9s. It's definitely nicer than we've seen in previous Gen 8.5 blasters. Comments, questions, post them below. Like, subscribe, share my channel with your friends, and participate in those monthly giveaways.